We're going to talk about adverse childhood experiences, or as they're commonly known, ACEs. In order to kind of have a complete discussion about ACEs, I've got to go give you a quick history lesson. We're going back to the mid 1990s with the emergence of the Kaiser CDC study that really started the ball rolling with the idea of how what happens to us in our childhood, especially stressful or traumatic things, affects us later in life. So this is how the Kaiser CDC study from the mid 1990s went. They surveyed about 17,000 Kaiser Permanente members who were getting physicals, adults down in San Diego County area, and they gave them questionnaires with 10 things that may have happened to them in childhood, experiences that may have happened to them in childhood. And those were the ACEs. Those were the initial adverse childhood experiences. That list was created based on what psychologists and psychiatrists and physicians had seen and suspected that there would be a causal relationship between these things and later in life health outcomes. And sure enough, the results of that study were just off the charts. And the level of impact of ACEs blew people away. Even people who suspected that there was probably a strong relationship were really blown away, especially by the health effects later in life that were happening to people. Again, these are adults getting physicals at Kaiser, talking about their own childhoods. Now, that initial screener that they had was 10 questions, and it kind of hit the broad ideas of things that I think we could all pretty much agree would be stressors on a child. So, did you not have enough food? Did you not have a trusted adult? Was there family insecurity as far as family structure? Was a parent out of the picture through divorce, separation, death? Was there abuse? Was there abuse between the adults or toward the child? And that could be sexual, physical, or emotional. So just kind of hit the broad spectrum of what we would pretty much all agree, like, ooh, that would leave a scar. And that was what got the ball rolling. Now, what was interesting is over time, as we see with pretty much anything that has to do with psychology or behavior, the understanding of things that could really affect us as adults grew. And so you see ACEs surveys that are much longer than 10 questions now, and they encompass things that weren't in the original study, such as, dealing with like growing up in a racist environment or being the target or the victim of discrimination, those types of things where there is a measurable effect. So it's grown. At the same time, often we will fall back on the basic ACE screener simply because there's so much data that goes along with it. There are so many records of, if somebody takes a screener, what the percentages are nationally and how that affects people. Now, here's where we get to the first part about ACEs and schools. We don't typically give the ACEs screener to students at large. We don't say, okay, kids, let's start the Tuesday off with everybody taking the ACEs screener, especially when we are not prepared for the fallout. We can trigger the heck out of kids and remind them of all their past trauma, and now you have just a room full of kids who are completely sobbing and dysregulated. So we don't typically do that. What is good about the ACEs screener, though, for us as adults, is to look at it and just have it in the back of our minds when we're talking to kids, because a lot of this will come out conversationally when the student mentions, oh, my parents are divorced, or my dad is dead, or my dad went to jail. All those things that kind of get our attention. Now we can kind of put them in that bucket of, okay, that seems like an adverse childhood experience. Now, we can't talk about ACEs without talking about the other side of ACEs, and that is the protective factors. And those are things that happen that help mitigate the effects of ACEs. So you might have had these bad things happen to you, but did you have a safe, stable, trusting, loving adult who helped guide you through these things? And protective factors can also be things like, did you get involved with a sport? Oh, you were on a team from age 4, you were playing soccer all the way through high school, and that team became kind of a surrogate family. Well, that's a protective factor. Did your parents get you to a therapist? That's another protective factor. Did you have access to healthcare? Protective factor. Were you able to move out of a dangerous neighborhood into a safe neighborhood? Protective factor. So there's a lot of protective factors that can mitigate what happened to someone. And this leads me to one of the challenges with talking to adults about ACEs is if we all got into a room together, we're sitting in a group, and I am talking to everybody about ACEs, and I say, look, the tipping point seems to be when we get to round 4, because ACEs have a cumulative effect. They kind of grow and empower in the brain with each event. And you'll have somebody in the room who's like, well, I had 6 ACEs and I turned out fine. And 2 things. One, guarantee everyone else in the room is looking at that person going, that's really interesting that you think you turned out fine. They're not going to say that, but they're thinking that. And then the second thing is, yes, but what protective factors did you have in place that helped ease the impact of those ACEs? And so typically when we get kids in alternative ed, we see the ACEs, we don't see a lot of protective factors in their lives. And the challenge for a lot of the kids is protective factors typically cost money. Getting your kid involved in this sport, getting access to healthcare, mental health, getting out of a dangerous neighborhood. If you're, let's say there's a spousal abuse situation, the spouse being able to move out and having the money to move out and separate from the abuser costs money. So often we see that ACEs are not a function of money. Getting out of an ACE-ridden environment often costs money. And so the kids that we typically see in alternative ed, not surprisingly, are the ones not only with high ACE scores, but a high poverty rate as well.